Hey everybody, welcome to the NACS Report Card. This is a new content series I'm doing where we go back and look at the seasons for various North American Counter-Strike teams and give them a little grade. Think of this as like a parent-teacher conference. And joining me very graciously for the first one of these, I got Mr. Graham Messioso Pitt. Graham, how you doing today?
Good, good. Happy to be home and spend some time with my family. And yeah, it's been a long season. I'm sure we're going to get into it, but yeah, happy to be home and spending some time at home and looking forward to next season. It's going to be interesting with 2025 Valve new rules and stuff. So lots to learn and lots to get into, and it's going to be a bit wild, I think. But yeah, just happy to be home, but looking forward to the future.
I've got a start off question for you, which is as someone who has both a team that you're responsible for and actual children, who do you lose more sleep over?
I mean, it's hard to quantify how the stress affects my sleep. So I would say that, I mean, directly that I can attribute to a specific person would definitely be my kids,
Hmm.
because they physically cough and wake up in the middle of the night and kick you out of bed. And yeah, I spend a lot of time sleeping on the floor sometimes. So I would definitely say I physically lose sleep over the kids, but
Yeah.
I definitely think there's an element of stress that goes with uh, being in the role that I have, and definitely yeah, definitely sometimes at events it's tough to turn off and go to sleep, and yeah, maybe don't get the best night's sleep. But I also consume copious amounts of caffeine when I'm away, so it's probably that as well.
That might have something to do with it. It turns
Listen,
out
listen. I'm not a scientist, Mike, but I've heard that caffeine can definitely affect sleep schedules. But I'm not going to pin it all on that right now.
having freely available energy drinks at every event might not always be the best for your circadian rhythm. But we'll leave that to the scientists. We'll leave that conversation for another day. We're gonna
Exactly. Yeah.
we'll dive into it here. I've got a little bit of a funny thing cooked up here. Did a little arts and crafts project.
I can see that.
Um,
You're very proud of it. I can tell.
I'm very proud. This is, the funny thing of having like dating a professional graphic designer is when I make my own
I,
terrible graphics and then she has to look at them. So I'm looking forward to seeing her reaction to this one. But we're gonna dive into it. We're gonna be grading this season. We've got an NACS report card here. I'll just go ahead and sign your name. You also get to see my brilliant paint skills here.
oh yeah.
Student for this one is gonna be Cole.
Okay. Make
Yeah,
it easy for yourself.
nice and beautiful. Yeah, I'm not going to write out all of complexity. Let's just go for Cole.
Yeah.
But we've got a few different metrics around here. The metrics are results, expectations, roster moves, stability, NA-ness, very important one there,
Yeah.
optimism, brand, and then we'll assign a final grade, working through this together about how you feel this season has gone for complexity for the team.
Okay. Yeah. Are we just talking about the last like 6 months, or like from the summer
Sort
break
of.
onwards, or like the whole year, or
I was thinking about focusing it on summer break onwards because ideally I'd like this to be a recurring thing where we sort of do it
yep.
during the
Okay.
various breaks. But if you wanna throw something into what happened right before the summer break, we could maybe extend that. Give you a
Well,
little.
Mike, we won ESL Challenger at DreamHack Summer
Yeah,
2024. So
yeah.
yeah, no, I mean, yeah, that might play a part, but let's focus on the main season. If there's any context, I'll try and add it if it's needed. But we can focus on the second half of the season,
We'll dive in.
second half of the year.
We'll
Yeah,
dive in. So we'll start out talking about the most quantifiable thing, right? About
yeah,
a Counter Strike team is at the end of the day the results. And uh, unfortunately for you guys, definitely wasn't your season in terms of results. I have the Liquipedia run here. Started
yeah,
off at the Esports World Cup. You guys got 0-2, got knocked out immediately.
yeah.
Blastfall groups, not great. Cologne made it through the play-in, which was nice.
Yeah,
Didn't.
we crushed the play, and that was, and we had some good. The thing is, like, the result looks bad,
Mhm.
but like we beat some good teams. Like we beat Eternal Fire, we beat Virtus Pro. Like we didn't play terribly. We got locked out by Mouse Sports and Liquid, which, I mean, that those two teams will become a recurring theme
Yeah.
across this season for sure. But we beat the teams we felt like we should have beaten, and we gave good games to the two teams that we lost to. And it's hard to quantify whether that's like an underperforming result or if that's like um, if that's a result that we should be happy with. But we're never happy with losing. But yeah, there's a lot to dive into with these kind of things, I think.
Yeah, I think that's very fair. I think we're also going to see that with a couple of these results as well. As it's like, who did you lose to? Who was
Yeah.
the knockout from? Is it somebody where it's like, okay, bummer that we ran against them in that part of the bracket, but it's life in a Counter-Strike term, or is it a we'll dive into the micro of that a little bit more. But
Yeah,
moving
yeah,
on,
definitely.
you have the Blast Fall Showdown. That doesn't go your way. Pro League, I think, is more encouraging. Obviously, the wonkiness of a Pro League format shows you guys
Yeah.
ninth, 12th, but it's a little more encouraging making it through.
Mm.
Um,
Yeah.
and then not looking so good. I Am Rio was a pretty quick exit. Again, the Liquid Mouse, I think, were both of the defeats, right?
Yep.
And then the RMR as well. The loss to Big at the end, going 0-2, battling back, getting to that last match and dropping it. Obviously at the major,
Yeah.
not ideal. So
No, like if you look at the results, they are far from where we hope to be. And if we base it purely on the final placements at the big events or most of the events, then it's an abject failure, I think, for us. Definitely below where we felt like we should have been and where we felt like we could have been based on the practice we had and how we felt going to a lot of these events. I'll say the elephant in the room, so to speak. We played a lot of good teams to get knocked out of some of these events, and by all means, that is also counteracted by the fact that we also lost to a lot of teams that we should have beaten, and we feel like we're a lot better than, and we should just never be losing some of these games. And I mean, especially like the first day of a lot of tournaments, we came into the events just not showing up really. Like Esports World Cup against VP, we didn't show up, which kind of messed us up. Blast Premier full groups, we lost to Heroic with a coach because we didn't show up. Um, yeah, I mean, what else was there? Pro League, we lost to M80 on the first day, but then, clearly the rest of the week we played a lot better. We beat Astralis twice, we beat Mousesports twice, we beat FaZe in the playoffs the week after. Like, we were clearly better than the team that showed up on the first day.
mm,
Yeah, kind of similar thing with Rio. We played Liquid in a BO1 on the first day, and yeah, I mean, obviously the major, two BO1s on the first day, we played like shit, and yeah, we paid the price for that, and that's entirely on us. It's not anyone else's fault. There's no external circumstances, but we need to be better than that, and that definitely cost us a lot. But also we can look at some positives. Like I said, the Pro League run. We finished 9th to 12th, but we beat Mousesports twice, we beat Astralis twice, and we beat FaZe. Usually, a run like that would put you in the semi-finals or the final of most events. Now, Pro League is a weird format, and the reason we had to beat Astralis twice and Mousesports twice is because we lost to M80, we lost to Big, two teams that I would say we should be beating. So,
mm.
it's not like it's an abject failure, but at the same time, we put ourselves in the position to have a terrible run. And I still remember looking at the playoff bracket when it got drawn. And I was like, FaZe Clan don't play Vertigo, Liquid don't play Vertigo, G2 don't play Vertigo, and if we get through that, it'll be Na'Vi who don't play Vertigo. And I was just like, damn, this is going to be a tough playoff bracket. So yeah, getting through the first game against FaZe was already a pretty big hump because we've never beaten FaZe before with this roster, so that was already quite a big thing. They were one of our sort of long-term bogey teams. Obviously, we played them in the Sydney Grand Final last year. They beat us there. We played them in the Blast full semi-finals last year at the full finals, and we lost them in the semis. So yeah, they were becoming a bit of a bogey team for us. I think they also knocked us out of a Pro League back in Malta like 2 years ago or something. So yeah, beating them was nice. Beating Mousesports for the first few times after losing to them like 6 times in a row was also really nice, and to beat them twice was also good. But yeah, I mean, ultimately the end result wasn't good enough for what we wanted. I think the other one that I like sort of feel like was a bit rough was the sort of the full groups in Cologne. I think mostly
Mm.
remembered for Horzak slamming his desk most of the time, but uh, the full groups, obviously, yeah, we messed up heavily by getting 2-0'd by Heroic with a coach. that actually, I think that match actually ended our Vertigo win streak, which was also probably more embarrassing because I think we were on like a 13 win streak on land before we lost to Heroic with a coach. So
Hmm.
yeah, that was rough. But I still remember the we played Spirit in the group final, and we beat them on their map Dust 2, which I thought was quite impressive. Like we went to OT against them and beat them, I think double OT actually. And then we had the game in our hands. We had Nuke in our hands. And then we did a big push. We took ramp control. We killed the two guys on ramp. We traded, and then we were in a 5v3. And for some reason, Chopper is just sitting on the ramp as a third guy, and three of us dropped down and died to Chopper, and all of a sudden it's a 2v3. And then we couldn't recover our economy from there, and we lost the game on Nuke. But I think we were like 10. I think we were 10-6 up, and it would have been 11-6 if we'd won that, and that was their gun round. So then it would have been, ideally 12-6, and I feel like from that point we don't lose. But yeah, we lost 7 rounds in a row and didn't qualify for full finals, which was quite rough. And then after losing that, we went down to the gauntlet stage. We played Navi, which is just terrible.
Yeah.
Like we played Navi, and then no offense to Nip and Astralis, but I feel like we would have probably beaten both of those, and they played in the other game and Astralis qualified. So, I think we got the worst opponent of the possibility. So it looks really bad, and the reason we didn't play well enough, it's our own fault. But I feel like there's a little bit of context there. And then yeah, Cologne. I mean, we beat. I can't remember the order. I think we played alternate attacks in the first game, which yeah, I mean, we should be winning. And then we 2-0'd Eternal Fire, and then we played VP in the first round of the main tournament, and we 2-1 them. And then we got 2-0'd by Maus in 2 close maps, which, I mean, yeah, Maus basically played us in every single tournament for like 5 tournaments in a row or something. It was ridiculous. And at that point, we just couldn't beat them at all. And then we played Liquid, who, yeah, certainly this season have just had our number in every possible matchup. So I feel like we met a lot of the teams repeatedly that just seem to have the better of us. And I feel like if we played a few other different teams, we might have had slightly better chances. But at the end of the day, we have to be capable of beating Liquid and Maus if we want to be in like the top, the consistently sort of top 6 or 7. So we didn't play as well as we could have done, but I think in a if you rolled the dice and had a different bracket, I feel like we could have also gone quite far, because I don't think we were necessarily playing that badly. But we just met the wrong opponent sometimes. But that's you have to account for that, and you have to be able to try and beat them. So yeah, it's on us, but I don't think all of it is as bad as it looks. But it certainly looks bad, and I think reflecting upon it, I think we would all agree. I mean, we definitely all agree that we massively underperformed this season compared to our expectations, and yeah, that's ultimately not good. So I probably, I mean, are you going for like American style grading here? Like
We're
like
gonna
A,
do
B,
that.
C, D?
I'm not quite ready. I do have a couple more questions for you about sort of.
Okay.
This is where I wanted to extend it to just before the break with that Jönköping
Yeah.
ESL Challenger Trophy. Is I feel like there's this fatigue that sets in when you're going to events and you're not winning, right? There's just sort of that feeling of like, yeah, maybe if you look at each event in micro, it's like, okay, well, the teams that we lost to are like reasonable teams to lose, or we played those games. But at the end of the day, when you're going back and you're just remembering where you exited, when you're looking at the macro, when you're zoomed out a little bit, there's like that fatigue that sets in. And you guys had that really hot start to CS2 with the Sydney final and a lot of exciting things. And then there had kind of been this, again, the fatigue of just like not necessarily going as deep, not necessarily getting the wins. And then you end the season with that trophy. There was the good pro league in season 19, and then there was the trophy in Jönköping where, maybe it's a challenger, maybe you feel like you should do it, but does that inject some life into the team, getting that opportunity, getting that trophy?
Yeah, it definitely injected a bit of life. Like it didn't change our outlook completely because, like you say, like it's an ESL challenger. It was one of the stronger ESL challengers, but like, I mean, the Mongols fucked up by not getting through the group stage, which they lost to Aurora in a BO1, which happens, and then they lost to Falcons, which, I mean, Falcons. I mean, I don't know if they're good or bad, but I mean, we played them in the final, we beat them. But overall, like it wasn't the ESL Challenger without like any other top 10 teams. I think we were just about top 10 at that point. So we were probably the highest seeded team in the tournament. It's really not. It was good for us to win, and we definitely enjoyed winning. And we sort of said, like, I remember Elige, one of the things he said, like, back on Liquid, when they were like in like 2018, when they were just getting like destroyed by Astralis at every big event they went to, they were just like, man, like, we need you to win an event. So like, let's just go play like DreamHack freaking Milwaukee or something, like, let's
Yeah.
just go play a DreamHack somewhere and just win it, so that we can like just get the feeling of winning. And that was what we tried to make. That was like, hey, like, we can do this, we're better than the rest, like, now we need to like prove ourselves on like a higher level. And yeah, it didn't really end up being that kind of kickoff that we wanted it to be. So yeah, we definitely hoped that would sort of give us a springboard, but it ended up really not being that beneficial to us in the next season. I think it certainly didn't make us like overconfident that we were
Mm.
like too good, because like, again, we grounded ourselves and we looked at the teams we played and we looked at the teams in the tournament, and we are like, hey, like, we should be winning this event. Like, this is kind of what we came here to do, and we did it.
Mm.
And it wasn't like a crazy special thing like, oh my god, we can finally do it, but more of like a proof of like, hey, we can do this because we should be doing this. Now we need to go take the next step. And yeah, obviously we didn't really take that next step, I would say.
Yeah. Do you? I mean, okay. So there is also the other thing about it feels like your roster in general, which is that they tend to be a little muted, understated in a lot of things. Someone else might say emo sometimes. Of like, that was a funny trophy lift, and that you've got like players lifting it and just being like, yeah. Is that something that, like, taking the time to celebrate the wins, to getting the trophy, to having those moments, is that something that, like, it's just outwardly people are a little bit more muted, or is it something that the team in general, like, genuinely does have I
I
guess a tough
mean,
time of like getting the positives?
no, I wouldn't say that. I mean, in general, like, the guys we have on this team are, they're not like super extroverted guys. Like, we're on
Yeah.
the whole, we're like quite a reserved bunch. Like, when we're alone in a team environment, like, we're really close knit. We really all like each other. We spend a lot of time with each other. Like, it's very laughy jokey. We do get very serious when we play, and I think when you look at that from the outside, it comes across as like being quite emo. But like, I listen to the comms. I listen to every single match comms we have, because I'm the one that goes through and syncs all the voice up and makes the voice comms so we can either use it for content or use it for our review. And so I listened to every single match. So I'm very aware of everything that was said, why it was said, everything like that. And in general, the comms are normal. Like, they're not like, we're
Yeah.
not like angry. We're not frustrated in general. Like, obviously there's frustrations. I think when you're losing rounds, like, you shouldn't be, and playing badly, there's frustrations. But it's not like we're like, I think people made a huge deal out of how emo we got. Obviously, yeah, Halls had 2 bad weeks, basically, blast into Cologne, where he was having some trouble, and yeah, we worked through that and got past it, and it's a nothing now. So um, it's yeah, I don't think it's as bad as it looks from the outside, but
Okay.
it's obviously hard for anyone on the outside to gain that insight. So it's um it's a tough one to navigate. But in general, like, we're we're not like a low energy team. We have energy, but we are very like stable. Like, we don't have like crazy highs and we don't have crazy lows. So we're much more like, what you're going to get from every person all the time, because there's no like variation, which I think is a pretty big positive in some ways, because at least it gives you consistency. I think we could definitely benefit from having more like uplifting, and we could benefit from people sort of like getting energy into the group. But I don't think it's like an essential thing, because I think actually we benefit from not having the super high highs contrasted with the super low lows.
Interesting. I do also, before we put the last number grade on, or letter grade on it, uh, I do think we have to talk about the major. I know that one's a little less fun in terms of the teams that you lost to, but I'm curious about your perspective on that, right? Because getting eliminated, making it to the major, but then getting eliminated in the in the
Opening stage, yeah.
opening stage, right? Talk to me
Yeah.
about the losses, right? Because it's FlyQuest and Passion in the BO1s, and then it's big in the elim games, and that's where the whole, like, every other event you look at, most of the eliminations, most of the losses are like either slow starts or teams that are understandable to lose to, and this
Yeah.
one feels like the 3 losses are not that.
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to be disrespectful to anyone, but like I think we should have beaten both FlyQuest and Passion. Like I think if we played as good as we can play, and that's on us. Like we need to turn up. Like that's no one's fault. It's no one's responsibility. Like from externally to like, oh, Complexity should have won that. Like we didn't play well enough.
Mm-hmm.
But I think we had like the 2 BO1s on the first day. If you have a bad day and you go 0-2, like that's just like it's tough. It's tough to come back from that. And I was proud about how well we played on the 2 following days. I think we pretty handily dismantled both Imperial and Cloud9 for the most part. I know we made it very tough for ourselves on Vertigo against Cloud9, but we brought it back and we showed pretty good mental resilience to bring that back. Because I think we were like 12-5 down or something, or 11-4 down. Like we took it real bad. I think we lost the half 10-2. So we played some really good Counter-Strike that week. The problem was we didn't play it on the first day, and I think going 0-2 just leaves you no margin forever. Like I think in an ideal world, we would never play big in the 2-2 game because we would never be in the 2-2 game. And yeah, I mean, I think that's entirely on us. It is entirely on us, and we know it was entirely on us. And we had a pretty big talk on the first day, and we basically said like, we need to get our shit together, and we did get our shit together to some extent, and yeah, we couldn't quite get it over the line in the end, and we didn't give ourselves enough rope essentially, and that was all because of the first day really. So yeah, I mean, I think that's, like I said, that's been a recurring thing across a few events now, that we've not come to events fully geared up, and I guess we need to look at how we approach our event attendances in the future to make sure that we're sort of in match mode from the day before the matches, not the day after the matches. So yeah, that's definitely a learning opportunity, I think, because it's something that I've noticed has been a bit of a reoccurring pattern. But yeah, I think on in most worlds we would qualify through that group. But yeah, I mean, what happens. YQuest played really fucking good against us. Passions played really good against us. They deserved the wins. We didn't play good enough. Like, no excuses really.
Yeah. Oh well, all right. I think that's a good place to then go into the conversation. And yeah, we're going for American letter grades here, ideally, being the NACS report
Right.
card. So it's like A,
Okay.
B, C, D, and then pluses, minuses, and then if you think it's just an outright failure, we can throw an F on it.
What's like the lowest like passing grade in your mind?
C,
Is that a
C
C?
plus.
All right, let's give ourselves a D plus.
D plus. Okay.
A D plus, because I'm giving the plus because we actually had some very good match results in some of these events, and that's the main positive, is that like we can play against the top teams, but we just our overall like end results for the tournaments were just not good enough. So I don't think I can give us a passing grade, but give us the plus because of the decent match results.
I think that's sufficiently. That's enough self-flagellating. You definitely you cleared the bar there. Talking about expectations, right? I think that this dovetails obviously with the results conversation, because different team, different expectations, different size. The conversation for like you guys in Liquid is different from the conversation for Nouns at NRG at this point, right?
Yeah.
My question is, I think most people watching this probably have their own idea of what the expectations are for Complexity. I know you guys have your internal expectations of what they are for Complexity. We kind of had that in the on-shipping conversation, where it's like we should win this event, versus another event where it's like we should go deep, we should make playoffs. My question is, what do you think, how much of a match is there between your personal expectations for the team and the external conversation about Complexity?
I would say they're very disjointed. I mean, like, I don't know how to say this without like in some way implying something negative somewhere.
I think
But, like,
I think you can let it. You can.
we operate on a, I would say, significantly smaller budget than let's say the most of the other top 10 teams. I can't say about all of them now because the Mongols are a legitimate top 10 team, and I know we're probably spending more money than they are. But like, if you compare us to G2, Spirit, Navi, Vitality, FaZe, Mouse, Heroic, Liquid, like they're all spending a lot more than us. I know that, like for a fact. And we are on an external perspective, like from the fans, we're expected to compete with those teams, and we don't have the resources. In some ways, we don't have the talent pool to compete. I know Liquid have gotten around that a little bit, but we don't have the talent pool. We want to remain as much as we can. We want to remain a North American core, so three North American players.
Hmm.
We want to represent the region, and we want to do it in a more authentic way, so that the North American fans really feel like they have something to connect with that feels somewhat all North American. Like, I'm aware we have a South African, I'm aware we have a Norwegian. To some extent, I would say they are necessary if we want to compete on a global level. I don't see the players in North America right now that could replace either of those two. So, I think they are essential. So, I think there is a huge gap between what people think they should expect of us and what where we should be in terms of like a resources perspective. But at the same time, internally, how we feel about ourselves, we definitely feel like we should be competing against those teams. We feel like we are good enough as players individually and as a team to compete with every single team in that top 10. So it's kind of a weird position to be in where like none of the expectations really line up with anything logical. and and that's definitely a little bit tough to deal with, because you read all these things out on the outside, and you're like, well, actually, we're actually punching quite far above our weight anyway to be
Yeah.
where we are. If we spend, I think I calculated it. I think on average rank this year we've been the eighth best team, and it's close. I think there's a team right behind us, like really close behind us. I think it's Eternal Fire. But on like average rank, we've been the eighth best team this year. So we haven't had a bad year,
Mm.
but like the top six, their like average ranks on HLTV have been like 3.5, like all six of them. Because like they've basically been trading. Teams have had like dips and troughs, and they've all gone up and down, and they've basically all averaged around about 3.5. And then VP are just weirdly in like seventh position. It's just like they just managed to like always be seventh and never really gone anywhere from there apart from like more recently. And then there's like us, obviously Liquid, I think Furia, Eternal Fire, and I think the other one is Astralis, are in like that kind of eighth to 13th position where we've sort of all been equally good and bad throughout the year. And yeah, it's Heroica in that group as well. Obviously, Heroica seeing a lot more success now than they were sort of earlier in the year. So yeah, we've all sort of had our good periods and our bad periods. So none of us have really cemented ourselves like definitively in that top 10.
Mm.
So like we're competing for top 10 in the world as a North American team, and I think that's relatively quite good. But again, compared to our own internal expectations, it's not good enough. I say that expectations as a team, as the players, the coaches, myself. Obviously, we have other expectations from the management as well, and it's there's I think you could maybe argue there's four very wildly different expectations for what this team should be accomplishing. So it's yeah, I think depending on the seat you have, you can look at it many different ways, and you can say, oh, we've been successful, or oh, we've underperformed, or oh, we should be doing better.
Yeah.
I think it's ultimately what matters is how we feel about ourselves, and how management, Jason, the CEO, feels about ourselves. And as long as we're achieving those goals, then we should be pretty happy, and we shouldn't really let the outside conversations in. So yeah, I think I try to do my best to do that. I like to read about everything people are saying about us because it's quite interesting. But I think overall, like, yeah, I think if you take it from a perspective of like have we done well as a North American team with the resources we have?
Hmm.
The answer is yes. Have we done as well as we would have liked to have done, and how well we feel like we should have done? No.
Okay. I
And we certainly haven't done as well as everyone thinks we should have done.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's one of those really like, because the conversation you have in other sports that have like, teams that are spending wildly different sums of money is you
Yeah.
look at like an F1 or like in the US we have baseball, right, where you have the Yankees who can spend basically infinite money, and then you have a
Yeah.
smaller market team that just doesn't have those resources. You can have that conversation because the numbers are more public, right? The information's available. You know what people are spending, and in Counter Strike, we don't know what everyone's spending outside of Maui putting together a spreadsheet one time on stream. Like that information is not readily available for people, contract numbers
Correct.
and that kind of spending. So I guess
Mm-hmm.
my expectation for the expectations grade is kind of the results grade, but weighted within the context of your own expectations for those results, kind of thing.
Mm.
And in terms of, yeah, who are you competing against? What did you deliver with what was available and that kind of thing? There's sort of more
Yeah.
of the what the complexity perspective on the framing is, I guess.
Yeah. I think the only thing that I would mark us down a little bit on is some of the losses we had to the teams we shouldn't be losing to.
Yeah.
I think that's where our expectations massively differed from where we felt like we should have been, if that makes sense. So yeah, I'd say like overall it's not like completely terrible. So I could see it being a C something myself,
Okay.
because like again, like internally I feel like, well, I think we all feel like we underperformed, but like taking everything into account, actually we've been pretty good this year. So it's I'd still say it's on the lower end just because of how bad it feels internally, but it's
Hmm.
not like it's definitely not as bad as the results, because again, like I think taking everything into context, it's we're still to some extent punching above our weight, but also feel like we definitely let ourselves down relative to the expectations as well.
So do you want to go straight C?
I think straight C seems fair, yeah.
All right, we'll lock in the straight C. And I think there's another question I want to have about sort of the conversation you said about both talent pool and budget that I think dovetails nicely into the roster moves conversation, which is that there's kind of this. So there is definitely a net like a serious downside to the limitations of trying to keep yourself within one region and also not necessarily having you're not going to go buy Monacy kind of budget. But
No.
there is kind of, and I'm curious to hear your perspective on this because there is kind of a slight. This is going to sound weird. There is a slight upshot in that for anyone who is North American who's competing right now,
Hmm.
you're sort of I guess the pinnacle team in terms of who is likely to pick up North American player, where the destination could be. Um,
Yeah.
so for domestic talent, who you're negotiating against, I suppose, is much more limited because let's be honest, European teams are not looking at North America to import players.
Uh, I wouldn't know, but as far as I can tell, they're likely not. No, I mean they could be going for one or two. I mean, Twists obviously went
Yeah.
to Europe a while back, and it's not imperceivable, but at the same time, I think it's unlikely that any tier two North American talents are going across to Europe. Um, Realistically, yeah.
Yeah. So I guess yeah, I'm curious to see, do you think there's any advantage um to some degree having your pick of the North American talent, or do you think that limitation in terms of the talent pool and who's available and that kind of thing is just fully net negative?
I mean, I wouldn't say it's a full net negative, because it's nice to you know it's nice to have the perception of having the pick of the bunch.
Hmm.
I think it's worthwhile mentioning that actually, like the sort of established tier two in North America right now is actually quite strong. You've got Wildcard, you've got Nouns, you've got Energy, you've got M80. Like those are four very established, strong organizations who are, in some ways competing directly against us. Wildcard placed higher than us in the major. M80 have beaten us twice this year. We beat them in the RMR, sort of where it really mattered. But they're definitely not that far away from us.
Yeah.
I'd still go on record and say I think we're better than both of them. But I think the gap is not as big as it used to be. I think they've gotten a lot better, which is the biggest thing, and that's a very promising sign. But it also does mean that it's not like I can just say, hey, do you want to join Complexity, and it can be a done deal. There's also organizations involved, there's contracts involved. It's not as simple as just grabbing them the best player. So on the one hand, it's good. I'd like to think that team players want to join us, but on the other hand, it's not as easy as it sounds. A lot of the talent is all locked up in those teams, so we have to be creative, I think, if we want to figure things out and try and remain the best. And I think I've gone on record a few times saying that I don't think academy projects are worth it in the North American region. I think overall they'll do more harm than good, and that's not directly a reference to what EG did. EG did what they did wrong, but in theory it could have been really good. But I just think there's not enough competition in North America to have an academy team right now. But I do think that long term academy team would be a really good thing. But I think that the ecosystem needs to evolve a lot more specifically within North America before that would make any sense.
Yeah.
And that does make talent pipeline quite tough, because either you're buying out the best players from your direct opponents, which is never going to be a financially smart move, in my opinion, because every team is going to say $1 million, and they're going to put a big price on there. And like, just being realistic, like, no North American player outside of Elige, NAF, and Twists probably are worth anything really like significant, because they're just never going to drive the revenue, the success that is going to pay back that money realistically. So it's hard to justify spending someone's money. If I go to Jason and say, hey, I need to spend your money, it's not really something I can justify that easily. So there has to be a certain element of creativity in how we go about these things, and it's not easy. So I can't remember what the question was, Mike.
The question was like, advantages versus disadvantages of operating in the North American space, basically.
Yeah, I mean, I would say that's the disadvantage is that pretty much all of your talent is very like hyper focused in a very small area, and that makes it quite hard to be like flexible. Obviously, like in Europe, you might find that there's great players on many different rosters, and they all have completely different contract times, and that there should be someone available at some point that makes sense to go for, whether it's like low contracts, like months left on the contract so you can make a reasonable buyout, or you're not like a direct competitor on a country level. So like if you're buying out like the best player, like let's look at like Matisse to Fnatic, the team that they bought him from, they're not like a direct competitor to Fnatic, so they have no like vested interest in bumping up the price because they're like going to lose out to. I mean, I don't know what they paid. I have no idea of the financials of that deal. I'm just like making an example because that's quite a good example of like a domestic team selling to like a European sort of tier 2 team. We don't have that luxury. If we want to buy a North American player in NA, we are buying off our direct competitors, so they are going to get worse and we're going to get better. So they want to be compensated for that. And I mean, this is also something that I built into our contracts at the start of when we built this team as well. I was like, I know EG and Liquid have way more money than me, so like I need to make sure that I'm getting compensated heavily for losing one of my players, because it's going to be very hard for me to replace that player.
Yeah.
So we had relatively significant buyouts as well, and it's part of the protection. So I get it, but it does make it quite tough to mobilize and have the mobility of players when we're all acting in that way. And I mean, look at Brazil. Brazil's like on another level.
Yeah, no one moves
in the same way, right? So I'm very glad we're not going down that route as much, and we're trying to keep things relatively sane. But at the same time, it definitely limits the capabilities that every team has to make changes. Once you get to sort of our level, I think when you're like 1, 2, 3 teams lower than us, it gets a bit easier, because then you can actually genuinely start looking at the the unsalaried, uncontracted players. You know, you can look at the party astronauts, the bosses, the timbermen. You can, well, maybe not timbermen, but you can look you can look at that level of team and be like, okay, we could actually make a change here and improve our team in some way. So I think it does get a bit higher the higher up the sort of ranks you go, but
Hmm.
you know that's also you know, something you have to deal with, being the kind of the big dog in the well, the big fish in the small pond. You know, in an ideal world, we'd be a big fish in a big pond, but you know, and that's you know, I don't want to shout us out too much, but that's also something we're trying to improve as well. Like, you know, we're, rather than investing in an academy team, we're investing in tournaments that, you know, the rest of North America can play and develop in, and you know, we're trying to grow the talent pool, trying to make it more sustainable for more players to play on a full-time basis, in the hopes that we will, you know, you know, grow the pond, and then hopefully there'll be more opportunities, you know. So
Yeah. Don't worry.
uh,
I put a category in that's going to factor that in. We got
oh,
brand
did you
there at the
really?
bottom. Yeah, brand is
Okay,
definitely going to encompass the
great.
tournament series.
I have nothing to do with the tournament series.
Doesn't
I'm not
matter.
even
You get brownie
remotely
points for
associated
it.
with it, but I just want to make sure people remember that we are doing things like that,
The
and
revival
you know,
cups. There
it's
will be brownie
the
points.
revival cups. Yeah, they're essential. I think looking at where you can invest in North America outside of having a team yourself, I think that's the biggest thing, because I mean, you can really look at like how much, I mean, you know, Fragadelphia helps a lot as well.
Yeah.
I hope Launders Land will have Valve ranking points. I hope Launders is on top of that, because those kind of lands will really help stabilize North America and give them the opportunities to compete at these global events. And I think that's the most important part, I think, about next year especially. So
Yeah. So diving into
way of
the
talking.
the conversation about the roster moves more specifically, I think there's sort of
Yeah,
4 points that we can have a conversation around, or three,
sure.
kind of. Um,
Okay.
I think in terms of roster moves for you guys, you had for this, think about this season, you had the
Hmm.
re-signing of Halzerk. You
Yeah.
have the roster moves that you guys have made at the end of this season now, minus Floppy, minus James. We don't know about replacements yet. And then I think there's also the third data point that I want to talk about is just sort of, and this is again kind of back to the expectations conversation, is there have been what other teams have done in terms of movement, and the conversation around why didn't Complexity try and get Mobs, or why didn't Complexity get Lake, or that kind of conversation, the what could have
Sure.
beens, if you will.
Yeah.
um so first I want to talk about the re-signing of Halzerk. You talked about it in terms of talking about the region of like you feel that it's essential to have that European opera, to have Halzerk in there. What is it about Hakon, about Halzerk, that you think is essential, that can't be replaced in North America, I
I mean,
guess?
he's just better than every other North American opera.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm not going to say it's a fact, because I'd like to have some quantifiable evidence to prove that, but like, he is just better than every North American opera right now, and yeah, I don't think anyone would want to take that argument with me, so I don't think there's too much to justify. But
Yeah.
you know, I mean, I think the bigger question would be like, why did you resign him rather than other
That's
European authors,
Let's
right?
dive into
That,
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 sure.
that's more the question, I think. And you know, we were preparing for this a long time. We spoke with Hokon sort of what, January, February time, and said like, hey, you know, this is what we want to see from you. You know, this is the kind of thing that we want to get out of you to, you know, to re-sign you. And he took that to heart, and he you know, people say he's playing for his contract. Well, you know, we're also helping him, and you know, we're constantly working with these players to help them develop as players. And you know, I think he definitely did a lot of the things that we asked of him. And more recently, I think you'll see people will barely recognize him. I don't think people have really realized that this guy's like put a ton of effort into his health. Like he's really worked on his weight. Like, people only seem like the businessman because they lost the mullet and, you know, did his hair all fucking fancy. But like, this guy's been putting like a ton of effort into like lose some weight, get a bit more healthy, like lead a healthier lifestyle, and it's definitely helping him both in and out of the game. And like, you know, those are the kind of things that we saw with him. And you know, he's a really dedicated guy. He puts a ton of effort in to learn the game. And you know, yeah, every now and then he has a fucking stinker a game, and that happens to a lot of people. You know, it's one of those things. But um, overall, like the value he brings to us, we couldn't find that in another player. Hulk Hakon has a very specific role within our system. He does a lot of bitchy stuff, and his statistics don't necessarily reflect that, because some of the things he does, like throwing flashbangs, don't get in any way incorporated into HLTV's rating 2.1 or 2.0. So obviously, the things he does that aren't reflected in the statistics aren't going to help him look good against other AWPers, other players. But when you go and look at his flash statistics and his opening kill statistics and things like that, it begins to paint a slightly different picture. So I think I think he's a player who is not fairly represented
Mm.
within the general statistical system, and that harms him a lot. And yeah, I mean, he's a really fucking stand-up guy. Like I love Hakon a lot, and when it came to it, like we looked, we did our due diligence. I can't go to Jason and say like, hey, sign this guy for whatever years, without doing my homework. And we went and did our homework, and the conclusion was that we had the best thing at home. So
Yeah.
um yeah, I mean, there's a lot of other really talented players out there. Like, we saw a lot of talent on display, but you've also got to factor in the things you don't know about them and the things that could go wrong. And you know it's not as easy as just saying like, this guy's going to be better because he hits all these shots and he does this thing and we saw him do this, because it's not as easy as that. And just to be honest, like the AWP market back in the summer, generally wasn't that great. Like when we were looking around, like we really didn't see that many players that we thought like, wow, like this guy could really be like an upgrade to us. And it 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 doesn't exactly fill you with hope that you feel like, oh, we're going to make this huge thing and take a gamble on a side grade or maybe even a downgrade. And it's like, yeah, you might just try and like change the environment and hope that things will get better. But I mean, that's a gamble enough in itself. So yeah, we were very happy. Well, one, that Hakon wanted to stay, and two, that we were able to keep him. So yeah, I don't regret that for a second. I think Hakon's a really valuable part of our team, and I think he's also someone that suffers when we shit the bed as a team. If you
Yeah.
can't get the guy on the AWP, I mean, he's a fantastic rifler. He's a great rifler, but if you can't give him the gun that he wants to use, it also makes his job a lot harder. So if we throw a stinker, he's obviously not going to have the best possibilities to succeed. So I think yeah, I don't I don't think he necessarily always has the best platform, and that's something we need to work on getting more consistent. So
Sure.
yeah,
So we'll mark that one as a positive.
yeah,
The
I
re-signing
think that's
there.
a strong positive. Yeah.
Then the other conversation is well, do you want to jump into the why nots and the what could have beens, or do you want to jump into the changes that you've just gone through?
Let's do the why nots and the what could have been
Okay.
first.
So the
Yeah.
conversation, I'd say there's I mentioned two already, but I guess there's a third as well of like in the op conversation, the ultimates. We can mostly leave that one. I think we've had that conversation about Halcon mostly. But the both, why didn't you go for Malbs and why didn't you go for Blake, I guess, is the conversation of what were there. Do you think those are things that you might regret in the future? Do you think that those are things that you don't regret, even with the information that's available now? That kind of thing.
I mean, Malbs is a pretty simple one. I mean, we've had a few opportunities, I'd say, to maybe work with Malbs.
Okay.
Um, and at the time that we had those opportunities, like he wasn't the player he is now. He obviously he obviously was that player, but there was nothing to indicate that he would have blossomed into what he is now. So, at the time that those moves could have made sense, it wasn't the best move for us. I mean, one of them I think came around when we got Elite, right? And I'm not, I wasn't going to be in the position to take a risk on a guy like Malbs when I can get Elite. So yeah, I think it makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
Obviously, would I have loved to have worked with Malbs, knowing what we know now? Obviously, hindsight is fantastic. why didn't we get him this summer when G2 got him? Because we don't have a giant fucking pot of gold, Mike. Okay, it's as simple as that. We do not have those kind of resources, right?
Yeah.
Let's just put that discussion to bed. Like, even if we wanted to get in that discussion, we wouldn't have even had the money to pay off the doorman to get inside to have the conversation. Like, it's just not happening. Like, and also, like, I don't think I could have even justified spending that much money on a single player. Like, I think based on the rumors I've heard and the numbers I've heard, like, I've bought whole teams for less than they bought him for.
Yeah.
Like, I'm just being honest. Like, it's turned out to be really good for G2, and I think they'll get their money's worth eventually, as long as it's a long-term deal and everything else. But like, we weren't in the contention for that buyout because we were just never going to be in contention for that buyout. So, I don't see that as an opportunity missed because we would never have been in the conversation to begin with. Who else was there?
Lake, who
Lake.
M80 brought in as the Mob's replacement.
Yeah, I mean, Lake. Lake came in as the Mal's replacement. I mean, am I meant to replace a Liege with Lake? Like, Lake has clearly proven to be a very good player. He's still very raw, and I think he's got, I don't know this for a fact or anything else, but I think he's got something to learn still, and that's great because he's only going to get better, hopefully, right? Which is great for the ecosystem. But I don't think we missed out on him because if you're gonna take a guy like that, he wants to be aggressive, he wants to be involved in things, and then if you're gonna put him on our team, he's gonna be in roles that don't really make sense for him. And I mean, I don't think we missed out on him, if that makes sense. Like,
Yeah.
Looking at, like, if you put him into Floppy's roles at the time, he's not going to be a guy who's going to be like a hard anchor lurker. And if you put him in Grimm's roles, I mean, Grimm is one of the most mechanically gifted players I've ever seen. And, he's playing more and more sort of defensive, passive every day as well. So it's not like it's going to be a 1-to-1, and then you can't replace JT. So because he's the IGL. So I don't really feel like we missed a beat with him. And I think, it's clear that he's a very talented player, and, one day it might be great to work with him, but it still has to make sense, I think.
Yeah.
I know people have sort of thrown out the idea that roles make sense, but Malbs going to G2 kind of did that in a way as well, because obviously they put him in roles that he wasn't playing before, and you could see it. He's even said himself that, like, he felt pretty shackled and he didn't quite understand, or not understand understands the wrong word, but like, he didn't feel super comfortable in the roles he was given. Now, if you look at it from the lens of, hey, come play these roles for 6 months and then you can have Nico's roles, it paints in a different picture, right? So I think there's a lot of comparisons, but also not direct comparisons that you can make with those kind of changes. But I don't feel like we missed out on Lake in the summer. And that's nothing to say that he's not a talented player and he doesn't have the ability to play on this team, but like, he's not going to replace a Liege, and that kind of ends the discussion for me.
Yeah, I think that's super reasonable. And then I think, so we can move into the conversations of the moves that you have just made, and then I think there's also a second part of that conversation, which is, why didn't these moves happen in the last player break? So we'll start with just talking about the moves. Floppy's out of the roster. Had a good long run with you guys. He's been benched. Is he benched or is contract over? I don't actually.
He's benched. Yeah.
Okay.
We're hoping that he will continue playing. There's a few interested teams, so yeah, we're hoping that we can facilitate a quick transfer to another team, and he can continue playing. I think he wants to continue playing. But yeah, I mean, I can get into that a little bit.
Yeah, let's do it.
I love Ricky. I think he's somewhat a victim of circumstance, in a sense that we obviously could not keep going with this roster. I think that was the overwhelming sort of decision at the end of the day, was that we as a team could not figure out how to make this roster work, and we tried real damn hard. And we looked at everything in the summer, and we didn't feel like there was we didn't feel like there was the right mix of players that were available for us to take a step to like bench a player and like officially start trialing or anything like that. Which people might say sounds silly after what we just said about Lake, but again, I think that the role aspect there made it extremely tough to justify. Obviously, we'd also just won an event, and I know people say like winning an event shouldn't stop you from making the changes you need to make, but when we looked at the players that were potentially able to come in and the moves we could make based on the contracts, you've got to remember that like if you wanted to go to Wildcard and get one of their players, well, they just made 2 roster changes for the 2 suites. So the other 3 guys were locked into their roster, right? And that's not to say that we went for the Wildcard players, but just to give you an example of like the issues that you can
And
face.
just to clarify that context, to anyone who's not familiar, that is because if you lost the 3 initial core, you'd lose all your ranking points on the Valve ranking.
Exactly.
Wouldn't go to the RMR.
Because the RMR invites were basically the very first thing in the season, there was no time for anyone to re-earn their ranking points. So if you lost your 3 core, you were out. So it's like, yes, they'd be willing to make a trade with you, but you have to pay them the compensation, opposite to, hey, we're going to miss out on this opportunity to qualify for the major. So you have to pay us, compensate us for that loss. And it's basically we looked at the market and we were like, I don't think we can make a change that we're going to be happy with at this time. And that wasn't specifically for Floppy, but just in general, like we're looking for like the best player we could get. Did we feel like we could make it work? And the answer at that point was no. We gave it 6 more months, and ultimately at this point we're now where we could not take this roster into another season and feel like it's gonna be different this time. We didn't feel like we didn't feel like things were going to be different. So yeah, when it came to figuring out who we were going to replace, ultimately we went with Ricky, and I don't want to get too much into why it was Ricky. I don't think that's fair. There's human beings involved in all this, and I don't feel like it's fair to talk about things that we all did and things like that. But we replaced Ricky, and we've spoken a bit internally about what we'd be willing to change role wise and things like that to try and get the best available player that we felt like would work. And ultimately, with all those conversations, it left Ricky as the guy that was taking the fall. And I really feel uncomfortable talking about all this stuff because it's someone I worked with for 3 years, and I have a very very strong connection with, and it was never easy, and it never is easy, and it's tough because I don't think Ricky necessarily did anything wrong, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
But at the same time, we could not take this roster into another season. So it had to be someone, and to some extent, Ricky's the victim of circumstance. And I feel like if he goes and plays on another team, one of these teams that's interested, he's gonna freaking tear it up, and he's gonna make us look like fucking idiots. So it's a really tough situation to be in, and I hate it really. I truly hate it, but it's part of the job, and it's something that has to happen, and we have to be capable of moving on. And I'm hoping that we'll bring in a player that changes our outlook in some way, and we can shift things up and try and make things work again.
I'm curious about I mean, I think it's totally understandable that this is the hard part of the job, right? It's like it's no fun to let somebody know that the run is over, that they're moving on to a different thing. That's never fun. I am curious about the thinking. You mentioned that there was the conversation internally of like where roles might swap, what might change to get the best possible player in. Can you talk at all about where you're looking in terms of who a player is, who you might be looking to get in? There's also the basic question of, Ricky was a North American player, was a U.S. player specifically. How important is it to you and to Complexity to keep either an NA core or a U.S. core specifically? Is that something you prioritize in looking into replacement?
US core, not so much. I mean, it's nice having the US flag. I don't know what happens. I think, do we get
It
like a
goes
US
half
Canadian
Canadian,
flag?
half,
Yeah, I mean
yeah, half and
that's
half.
fine. I can deal with that. Um, yeah, I don't think there's any pressure to get a US player specifically.
Mhm.
Like I said, we would like to represent North America, and we'd like to do it in a more sort of authentic way. And I think having the North American flag, whether it's the Canadian flag or the half and half flag or the US flag, I think that's pretty important. But I think we're also getting to the point where, if we can't improve the team and do that, then we are in a position where we may have to do sort of the hybrid uh, roster where we have like the two Europeans, the wild card player in JT, and the two North Americans.
Mhm.
That's definitely a possibility, I would say, more so than it's ever been, because we want to compete. We want to be the best team in the world. We want to compete against the best teams in the world, and if we don't feel like we can do that because of the flag, we want to still play North America. We want to represent North America, and I think Complexity should always be a North American brand. So we still want to have that tie-in, but we also want to be successful. We want our fans to watch us play against the best teams in the world. We don't want to take a step backwards. So it's not easy to combine both of those things. And if it was, it would be a very simple and obvious decision, I think, because it would probably be quite obvious who the player was. So it's not easy, but we're taking our time and trying to make our way through the list of options and all the players, and we're doing our due diligence, I guess you could say, making sure we don't miss anyone out. But it's certainly not set in stone at this point. We've taken a lot of phone calls already this week, and we're going to take some more to try and filter through and talk to the possible players, and
Mhm.
and yeah, see where we end up. But it's never an exact science. Even if you feel confident, it's never an exact science. So it's yeah, it's a tough time, and it's not easy for anyone because, yeah, like I said, we're replacing a dear friend, and that's already pretty negative. And then, yeah, we have to try and figure out who we want to spend the next 6 months of our lives with. And that's like I said, we spend a lot of time on the road. We spend a lot of time with these people, so it's
Yeah.
you want to be as sure as you can, but you can never be 100% sure. I've referenced it a few times. I think there was like a presentation given by I think his name is Dr. Ian Graham. Actually, I think his name is Dr. Ian Graham, and he was the former head of data analysis or head of something at Liverpool Football Club. And he basically said, like, every single transfer in soccer boils down to like 7 success factors. And because of the way probability works, even if you're 90% sure in all 7 areas, and that's like, does he fit the tactical style? Does he fit is he going to adapt to the way of life in the new country or the new city, and all these different factors. And even if you're 90% sure in every single factor, that still only leaves it at like a 49% success rate.
Yeah.
Which,
Yeah.
when you're spending, I mean, they're obviously spending hundreds of millions in some cases, 20 million, whatever. We're not spending those amounts of money, but at the same time, we also only have 5 players who ever play, whereas they have squads of 25 players and 11 play. So their risk is pretty low in that sense. So, when it's so hard to find the exact right player, and the stakes are extremely high. It's not a fun experience, to say the least. So yeah, we're working through it, and I'm sure when we have information, you'll be the first to know, Mike. I'll tell you personally before
I
before everyone else. I'll
I
tell
would
you,
appreciate that. I would
and then
appreciate that for sure. I'll
and then I'll
I'll I'll
tell
keep
Jeff.
myself off of Twitter. Yeah, then give it to Jeff. Yeah. The true stalwarts of North America, me and
Yeah,
Jeff.
yeah, exactly.
I I do want to ask about the Elige exit interview from the major, right? Because he had a quote at the end of
Yep.
it, which you had to know as part of this conversation of like
Mm-hmm.
The exact quote is, it was, basically, are there changes on the board? Do you have an opinion regardless of what might happen about complexity? And his quote was, we haven't talked about anything, obviously. I don't have any plans that I've already set or anything like that. But for me, I want to win next year. That's the only thing I want. I've been feeling like I want to win. I'm ready to win for 2025. And I'm going to do whatever it takes to make sure I'm in that position to win. So
Yeah.
Obviously that interview immediately after the elimination of the major, it's always going to be emotional. Players aren't necessarily going to be as careful with their words as they might in other contexts. All of that in mind, that does read from an outside perspective like there's a possibility that Elige wants to be on the out into another situation. Is there any possibility of that? Is that a conversation that's been had? Is there anything along those lines?
Yeah, I mean the conversation's definitely been had, and I mean I don't want to speak too much about it publicly, but yeah, a conversation's been had, and it's not something that is directly related to necessarily like this one result, but it's we talk to all our players, we like to find out where they're at and things like that, and John has been very clear that he wants to win, and that's why we brought him in the first place, and it's why we got a lot better when he came in. And we value him a lot. We value his work ethic, his drive, his leadership in many ways as well. And we want to continue working with him, but we also have to respect the fact that he feels like he's at the top of his game, and I would agree with him. I think he is at the top of his game. So he wants to be on a roster that can compete, and whether that's with us or without us is sort of the question really. And
Mm.
yeah, I mean there's definitely a possibility that he could leave, but that's also down to a team that he wants to go to and a team that wants him, and we can't foresee the future. So any player is available for a buyout if everyone's willing to do it, right? So I think it's more a question of whether all the stars align, and if they do, then hopefully hopefully we'll be able to keep him. But there's always a possibility that a player like him could leave, and I think like I said, we're prepared for it, and if it happens, it happens. But in an ideal world, he would stay with us, and we would continue on. I think having him with us for the Austin Major will be a huge boost. So yeah, I think it's one of those things we have to just see what happens. I think
Mm.
there's going to be a huge roster shuffle in Europe. I don't know if they're going to want to try and take any North American talent. But if a team comes in with an offer, and the money makes sense from all parties, that's how a transfer works, right? You don't necessarily plan on losing a player. It's not like we've gone out and said, hey, this guy's for sale, because that's not what we've done.
Yeah.
But we can't stop it if a team comes in and offers us money like they did for Malbs, and he wants to go. There's a good chance that he could go, yeah. And I wouldn't wish any ill will upon him. He's earned the opportunity. He's earned the right to do that. So I think it's just a question of circumstance really, and we'll see what happens over the winter break. But certainly hoping that John stays with us, and certainly hoping that we can provide him with a roster that he's happy with, that he feels like he can compete with, because that's ultimately what we want to do for all of our players. We don't want anyone feeling like they're wasting their time here. So
Mm.
it's sort of a bit of both really. And I think that's what he meant in both ways. He wants to push us to provide him with the best roster that we can provide him with. And by all means, if we can't do that, then he's a player that's at the very top of his game, and I think he should be competing for world championships and titles, and it'll be great to see him go on and do that.
Yeah, I think that's a nice holistic outlook on it. I think there's one other aspect of roster moves that we haven't touched on yet, which is James IRL, who was the analyst, assistant coach role with you guys, traveling with the team, was removed. What went into that decision?
I think that we as a team have evolved quite a lot, and what we want out of a analyst or assistant coach also changes over time. I think you begin to want different things and have a different outlook on things. And if I looked at all the different ways that we had prepared for matches in the last 3 years, I could probably point to about 6 or 7 times, both with Anton, our previous previous assistant coach and both with James, where we've completely rehashed the way we approach matches, the way we prepare, the information we provide to the players, all that kind of stuff. And I think we just reached a point where we wanted another more significant change, and it made a lot more sense to do this when we were already making other changes and sort of rehash the overall kind of team. And like I said, we're a team that's generally quite stable in terms of the mood and environment, but we want to keep trying to lift it up and change things. And we're trying to search for we're trying to search for the magic fix, right? Because there's no obvious fix. So we made the decision to part way with James, and I think he's been a fantastic asset to us. He's changed a lot of things very early on that were hugely beneficial, and hopefully we can all move on. And I think he has a very bright future if he wants to pursue that. And I'm sure there won't be a shortage of teams looking for his help, and I think he'd be very valuable to a lot of people. So wishing him the best. And I wish we could have had better results overall, but it's ultimately we decided to make a change because we need to change things up a little bit and see what we can do. And on the assistant coach front, I'll be honest, it's not a major priority right this second.
Sure.
We're still focusing mostly on the player aspect, and then the coach. I mean, I've got about 60 60 might not even actually be an overstatement. I've got a lot of DMs from a lot of people who are all very interested, and we'll see where that goes. But I don't foresee it taking too long to appoint a coach once we want to. But I think right now priority is on the player side, and then we'll wrap up the coaching aspect. It might be we change the role a little bit. It might be we sort of push more towards like a very hardcore analyst, but less on the coaching side, and try and get some, maybe find someone who's more into like the data aspect, and try and get some leg ups there. But it's definitely a role that we're sort of evaluating what we want to do with it, because we're not quite sure we're getting the most out of it at the moment, is what I would say.
Has there been any, on that conversation, getting someone more oriented towards the data side, but also the other end of that spectrum of like, we have seen the rise of the performance coach in the Counter-Strike world in terms of, Liquid has a performance coach. Navi,
that's sort of what I was hinting at. Is that right now like I said, we don't operate with the same resources that a lot of our competitors do. So we can't afford to an assistant coach, an analyst, a performance coach, we can't afford to have all these things. So we do have to decide where we want to spend our money and where we're going to get the most value out of it. And that's kind of what I alluded to before, is like, are we going to get more value out of having an assistant coach, or could we maybe allocate those funds to another area that might benefit us a bit more? So it could be like a hardcore data analyst, it could be a performance coach or something like that as well. We have to see what we want to get out of that. But,
okay.
It's sort of definitely open to discussion, I would say.
All right, well, let's throw a letter on this. Obviously, it's a little bit weird right now, not knowing the other end of it, who the player is that's going to come in. It's hard to like give it a quantifiable thing in terms of what the overall moves, but with the overall picture of like moves that you've made this season, obviously the proof will be in the pudding of what the team does with whoever comes in next season. So I guess let's leave Floppy and James out of this evaluation until we know what the other is. What do you feel about the moves that have been made in terms of Halzerk, in terms of maybe the missed opportunities, in terms of now making just the general decision to make substantial change to the roster now at this point in time?
I mean, we're not counting Malbs as a missed opportunity, right?
Again,
just
you
couldn't,
because
it was unreal.
Unless you were going to win a lottery ticket, that one wasn't happening.
I mean, it's tough to say, because obviously, like, we haven't had the best season, so there's definitely a strong argument to say, like, we've obviously made a change now to make a change, because we just know that this roster isn't going to work, and that's obviously based a lot on hindsight. I think people would make an argument that we could have or should have realized this perhaps back in the summer, or we should have had the the sort of the balls to make this move in the summer. And yeah, with hindsight, I would probably agree with them. Um, so I think I'll stand by the Horzok re-signing. I think that was the best move we could have made. So I don't have any regrets about that.
Sure.
So I'd still have that rated quite highly. So I think we're probably somewhere in like the B minus category because I think there's some element of like should have, could have, would have made a change in the summer if we'd been
Sure.
omnipresent or had future sight or something. But ultimately, any season that results in having to make roster changes probably means that you should have made roster changes. So I guess there has to be some negative to that. So yeah, B minus seems fair. It's a tough one because it's hard to, without actually having made roster changes ourselves coming into the season, it's hard to hard to say that we made good or bad decisions. But
Yeah.
yeah, I would
Right.
say the reason
There's going to be
yeah.
some teams which this is just an NA for, NA, not North America, but non-applicable.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, and almost not applicable to us as well. I mean, the whole
Yeah.
like re-signing I think was good, but yeah, maybe with hindsight could have made a move in the summer. But like I said, we looked into it and there was no move that made any sense. So
Yeah.
it's not like I feel like we made the wrong decision or we made a bad move, but at the same time, you could argue we probably still could have should have done it. So
B
yeah,
minus feels fair.
that's a tough one. Yeah,
I think these next categories are going to go quicker. I know, I always know when we do anything together that we're going to talk a lot.
yeah.
But I don't want to take too much of your time, as I know you're in the hunt
It's
right now.
it's nearly midnight. It's okay.
So stability. I think this one's pretty comfortable for you guys. I'm curious to hear your thoughts on this. This is just like generally the I guess the platform of the season. There would be teams at times where they've been up and down. There's been things all over the place. You have personal issues coming out into public, that kind of thing, which might
Yeah.
impact the stability score. You guys have made a change, but it's not like you didn't give the previous team a good, long, stable run to do it. What do you think about this concept in general for the team?
Yeah, I mean, I think overall I think over the course of the whole season, we've been extremely stable.
Mm-hmm.
We've sort of been in that kind of ninth to 12th position. We finished ninth to 12th at Pro League. Sorry, yeah, ninth to 12th at Pro League. We finished ninth to 12th at Cologne. Obviously, the major was a pretty bitter disappointment. I think it was like ninth to 12th at Rio. Like ninth to 12th just seems like our freaking numbers right now. And like I said, if you look across the whole year, like I said, we've been in that kind of eighth to 12th position the whole year on average. So it's about right. That seems to be where we are. So from that perspective, we're pretty stable. But then you look at our performances during a single week of competition, and we're
Yeah.
freaking all over the place. So it's really hard to quantify that in an overall statement. But I would
Yeah.
say, I would say this season has felt very stable.
Okay.
So, but I don't really know like if that means it should be an A, or maybe you want some instability to sort of go up a bit.
Do you want to hit it with a B plus? Nice, comfortable, the most stable of grades. If you brought a B
Yeah,
plus home, your parents aren't going to be mad at you ever. But if it's not an A, they're not going to be ecstatic.
yeah, yeah. I mean, it's not results, right? It's stability. So yeah, I mean, we've been B. We're definitely a B or a B plus for stability.
I'll go B
But
plus.
that doesn't necessarily mean it's a good thing, but it's
I'll even
it's
draw a
definitely
slightly better
we've
grade.
definitely been stable. Yeah.
That's good though. It's different aspects of it. Um, and anus. This is an interesting one for you guys because you do have a European and a South African, but Johnny Theodosius has been here long enough that I feel like we get to adopt him. And Halzer's perhaps the most American Norwegian of all time. Uh,
Yes.
Aggressively American Norwegian. Um, where do you want to go on an anus? I feel like we can just throw a number in here.
I mean, we've got 3 out of 5. So I mean, I guess I mean, Johnny's lived in North America since like 2018.
Yeah,
So
he's ours now.
he's been there for like 6 years. Like I still count him as a North American. It's just
I agree. I claim him.
yeah.
100%.
I mean, he's one of the guys that spends the most time in North America, weirdly enough. So yeah, I would say we're pretty North American. I mean, Håkon
We putting it in
eats
there.
like a North American. He has a very North American outlook on food. Like he loves American food. Um,
This is what I'm feeling.
yeah,
I think it's
yeah, A
reasonable.
minus. Yeah, I mean,
Like
we
it
have
could
got two of
be
the most
perfect.
North American imports ever.
Yeah, it could be
So
all perfect actual North American. But there is some, and again, I'm gonna just count. I just count JT as North American at this point. I know he's technically South African, but when's the last time he played a game of Counter Strike in the South African scene? It's like, you
it's
know,
probably today. Actually, he's probably
yeah,
played a pug today.
pugging is different from scrimming,
he's,
tournament, any of those
he's
things.
I'm actually gonna do a face it check on him now. Let's see if he played a game today.
Yeah, that
No, he
call.
hasn't played a game today. No, never mind.
There you go. We'll give it an A
Yeah.
minus. I'll even straighten that up a little bit. There we go. Optimism. So this is, I think there's sort of two parts of this, which is your optimism for the next season and the optimism that you guys feel like you've earned from your fan base for the next season. How optimistic should the fans be? How optimistic are you about going forward? Obviously, for the fans, it's hard to quantify that exactly until you know who the player coming in is.
Yeah. Well, I'd like to
Um,
think trust us. So
yeah.
I'd
What
like
do you?
to I'd like to think that there's optimism, but yeah, it's very hard to know until I mean, so in some ways we don't even know what events we're going to be playing next year. At
Yeah.
least this year we had we
That's a good place to take this conversation. So now we've got, I know the ESL one just came out,
yeah
but we do have a much better picture of what the big three are going to be doing in terms of their profit sharing and what that looks like.
yeah
Because for anyone again who's not familiar, Blast, PGL, and ESL have all published the details of their revenue sharing agreements, and there are some revenue sharing agreements coming through from all three, I believe.
no,
But
PGL has none. PGL is
PGL has
pure prize
no
money.
revenue sharing agreement, so there we
Yeah.
go. So then the question is, in this new ecosystem where there are no partner teams, they can't lock anyone into exclusive deals or any of that. These revenue sharing agreements from Blast and ESL have been structured to give teams a reason to favor their events. What are your thoughts in terms of where complexity might go in terms of who they choose to play?
Um, like just to be like straight off the bat, like, and this isn't a negative thing, and I know people will tell me it's a negative and tell I'm entitled and everything else, but like for every single partner team going into next year, like next year is a very clear negative.
Yeah.
Revenue is going to be down, I'd say, very significantly for pretty much every single partner team. There might be like one or two that had a really bad year, so they might not be getting that much this year, but like for the most part, every single partner team is taking a pretty big hit next year. And that definitely means that they're going to try and prioritize the Blast and ESL circuits, just because those are the circuits that are offering revenue share or sharing of some description directly to the teams. Um, so yeah, we hope that we can play as many of those events as possible, because both ecosystems have essentially like a loyalty system. It's like trying to fly on your favorite airline. You want to build up the loyalty so that you get the benefits at the end. I know that's a problem you've been having, right, Mike?
I'm gonna get over the line. I'm getting over the line. Gold
Are you
status, baby. One of my
gold
goals for
status?
2024.
Okay.
I'm gonna have gold status.
You want to hear something sickening?
Yeah.
I've got gold on Star Alliance and and on Sky Team.
Oh my god. Yeah, I remember last
Yeah,
year you had a spare gold to give someone. That's
yeah. I gave
ridiculous.
that ended up going to Rugger from Australia, or not? It wasn't with Australis then; it was with OG. But yeah, Rugger from Australis got that. I
Shout
hope
outs to
he's used it
Rugga.
well.
He owes you a nice
Uh,
dinner for that.
he does owe me a nice dinner. Um, but yeah, yeah. So I think that's the main thing, is that we are used to having a certain amount of revenue, and we're never going to get back to those levels, but
Okay.
anything that we can bring in to try and be more sustainable. People think that we're just pocketing that money, but no, it goes to funding our entire operation. So we're taking a very significant hit, and I'm sure we just spoke about it before we started this podcast, but Jason's going on the Four Horsemen podcast, and I'm sure he's going to say all the same things. But it's the ecosystem for next year is looking pretty rough
Hmm.
for teams that are used to those kinds of revenue. And I think there's going to be a pretty hard reset. But yeah, we're going to do our best to attend as many of the events as we can that will help us recoup. some of our costs, and help keep supporting the players, because that's the most important thing. But we will definitely be attending other events outside of those ecosystems. I'm pretty sure, as long as we remain in the ranking. I did get an email from them today, but it did clearly say unofficial. But I'm pretty sure that we will attend the PGL Cluj-Napoca, the first PGL event of next year.
Sure.
Excited to go to that. And yeah, hopefully we can sort of mix and match as best we can. We're not in the best place in the ranking right now. I think we're like dead on 16, which is a very precarious place to be, because a lot of the invites stop at 16 or stop at 12. So we need to get our shit together pretty quickly and start winning some matches, and making sure we're justifying being able to pick and choose which events we go to, because there's a very good chance if you fall any further than where we are now, you just get no choice, and then
Then you
it
go to
doesn't
what
really
you
matter
can.
what
Yeah.
doesn't matter what you want to do. You have to take every event invite what you can, so you can try and get back on top. The good news is there's no shortage of events, so there will be invites that trickle down, and there will be ways to attend events, because people aren't going to go to every single event, back to back to back. But in an ideal world, in an ideal world, I would attend every single ESL event and every single Blast event as a minimum, and then from there pick and choose the events that make the most sense in between, from a travel perspective and things like that. Now that's unrealistic for a team like us, at least where we are now. That's fine for the mouse sportses and the FaZe and the Vitalities and the G2s of the world, but
Hmm.
it's a bit of a different world for us. So yeah, we need to try and navigate it as best we can. But like I said, the good news is, at least, unless we really suck for like 6 months, there'll be events to play, and we will have an event every few weeks, or maybe once a month or something, where we'll have the opportunity to show ourselves. And yeah, from that point, it's just about performing, and yeah, hopefully we can. I'm very happy that a lot of the formats for next year have gone to a heavier BO3 system.
Yes.
Shout out to PGL for doing full BO3 Swiss. Um, I think that's really, really good. I think BO1 Swiss, or BO1 opening round Swiss in the majors, needs to go as well. So I'm hoping that I know Blast messed up their their post today, because they put a time that extends the
I did see
major.
that.
Yeah, yeah. I'm hoping that they extended it by 7 days,
Hmm.
and it only takes 5 days to play a Swiss. So unless they're just putting 2-day breaks in between every single stage, which would be ungodly stupid and horrible for everyone involved, unless they're doing that, I'm hoping that that means that they're going to use all the extra times in between to run BO3 Swiss. But I don't know. I'm just
That would be
hoping and
sick.
praying. Yeah,
It'd
like
be
any
nice.
additional BO3s we can get in the Swiss will be so important, especially because now if there's going to be three Swiss stages back to back to back, like you go BO1, BO1, BO3, BO1, BO1, BO3, BO1, BO1, BO3, and then playoffs BO3, BO3. But if you want to go the whole way, it's like you have to play six best of ones minimum.
Yeah.
It's like I feel like that's just crazy. So yeah, hoping that the majors get changed, but a lot of the other formats that are coming out of, yeah, PGL, like I mentioned, yeah, ESL. I think they've introduced full BO3 for like Pro League, although we're not going to play the first season of Pro League, I'm pretty sure. Yeah, in general, a lot of the formats have gone more towards a full BO3 format, and they've got like Swiss formats, which I quite like. Swiss formats, they're never done perfectly, but I'll take a Swiss format over a single elimination format any day. So it's yeah, I think there's going to be lots of opportunities. So I'm optimistic.
Okay.
If you're where we are right now, I think it's fine. I think if we slide like any further down, it's going to change very quickly to very scared, because I think there's definitely a point where you can drop off the face of the earth, and if you suddenly stop getting invites, but you also haven't had a chance to play qualifiers. Like I know, for example, like the first qualifiers for the Blast Open Spring is during PGL Cluj-Napoca.
Yeah.
So we can't play the NA qualifiers for that, because we're going to be, hopefully we're going to be in Romania. So that means that we're now losing an event ahead of time. So, there could be a knock-on effect where you miss one event, you miss the qualifier for another event, and then all of a sudden you've missed out on like 2 or 3 events because you then missed the invites for the other ones, and then all of a sudden you could miss out on a big chunk of events.
So if you lose that ranking mid-season, you're kind of screwed until the next season, realistically.
Well, I mean, not even until the next season. Like you basically just have to go back to North America and start playing qualifiers and earn your way back, which by all means is completely reasonable. And I'm not saying that's unreasonable. I'm just saying it's terrifying in our position.
Yeah.
Like I'm not saying we should be invited to every event, and because we're complexity, we should be in all these events.
But
no
this
matter
is
what.
we can have the complexity centric conversation here. You can be
Yeah.
can be selfish. We're looking at the
Yeah.
complexity worldview for optimism next
Yeah,
season.
exactly. I'm just saying it's terrifying for us looking at that
Yes.
because and again, that's not because I feel like we shouldn't have to go back to North America, but like in an ideal world,
Stop
we wouldn't
couching
have
it.
to keep flying back and forth.
I get it. I get it. I get it. The audience, if you don't get it, don't worry about it. Don't tweet about
if
it.
You haven't, if you haven't
them
got
a
it by
break.
now, you need to just shut off the podcast. It's over.
Give him a break. Don't
Yeah.
tweet. Don't clip that segment and say why is he so entitled? Yada yada yada.
Yeah.
We got it.
Exactly.
All right. So your optimism, if you had to give it a letter grade for next season of complexity, we'll do it that way. For first season of 2025 for Cole.
I would say a B plus. I think that we underperformed ourselves this year, and I know we can do better. And I'm hoping I'd like to back ourselves that we're going to bring in the right player, the right support staff, whatever it may be, that we're going to do better. So I can't exactly go out and say we're going to be a D, can I? I mean,
Yeah.
I can be very pessimistic about next year, and there's still a lot of things that need to be solved from a Valve level and from a TO level. Mostly from a Valve level, and I could be very pessimistic and say like that ruins my optimism, but at the same time, like I fucking love Counter-Strike, and I know there's going to be lots of Counter-Strike to play and lots of Counter-Strike to participate in, so it's definitely not all doom and gloom. And I do, part of me does get quite excited by the open ecosystem and seeing all these events, but then I also look at the other side of it where I'm like, holy shit, like every single team is going to get either super burnt out or they're going to not attend the right enough events, or they get I feel like it could go so many different ways. So there's still a thing lurking in the back of my mind, but I'm hopeful that everything will be okay.
All right. I like it. I understand the fear. It's going to be, as with all things, speaking about in a vacuum, speaking about in an academic sense, only goes so far. Once the rubber hits the road and we see what actually happens, it's going to be interesting to see what happens in 2025. Brand. This is basically all the things that aren't just the team and performance of like complexity. So the NA Revival Cups, the like social media presence, merch, fan base, interaction with fans, all of that stuff. I think you guys get a massive bump from running the whole circuit of the Revival Cups. Those have been awesome to see. Really cool to see the events. Very important, as you said, just for getting Valve ranking points and meaningful matches so that teams can climb. What do you think about it all? What do you think about complexity's presence in the market, I guess?
I think we do a pretty good job. I think we do the best we can. It's not like you can't magic a raucous fan base out of thin air. It takes a little bit of time, and I think in general the overall how do you say, like the overall sort of vibe for NACS has definitely improved since I mean this is not just like last season, but like in general since I sort of got involved back when we started this team. Has definitely improved a lot since then.
Yeah.
I feel like there's a lot more sort of optimism in both us as a team. Obviously we've gotten better over the years, so that makes sense. But also just in North America, and I think people appreciate what we're trying to do, and I think we've got a figurehead like Jason who people have a crazy amount of respect for, and they want to see him succeed, and I think that definitely helps us out a lot. So I'm very thankful for Jason for for the opportunity, but also for all the all the work he's done, the blood, sweat and tears, and I'm sure you can go read about his story in multiple other podcasts. I think he's done one with both Richard and Thorin this year. Pretty big, reflective interviews. So yeah, they're out there. But yeah, I think overall we're in a pretty good place. I think we're still building it. People aren't going to stick around forever if we suck. I don't think so. I'd like to think we'll continue being successful, and people will see us as the flagship North American brand. Hopefully, still featuring a vaguely resembling North American roster is the hope. Yeah, it's not easy out here, Mike. But yeah,
Yeah.
we're trying our best, and at the end of the day, that's all we can do, and I think we're doing a pretty good job. So it's overall the general sentiment about North American CS is not that positive, but I think most of that comes from
It's
jealous and bitter Europeans who just
yeah.
don't want to see us succeed. So
They want to
that's
keep us down.
he says that as a European himself.
Yeah, in Denmark, you say that. But
Yeah,
yeah.
exactly. So yeah, I feel like we're doing pretty good. I'd put us like a solid B plus.
All
Like
right.
I don't know what else we could do. So maybe even an A. You know what? Fuck it, Mike. Change it to an A.
I'll
I'm
give it an
I'm
A.
I'm giving everyone the credit back here. Like we're doing everything we can do.
I think you are.
Um, you know,
Especially like the tournament series is just like it's so important for building, like as you said, instead of putting the money towards an academy team and trying to give one group of 5 players the opportunity to
yeah,
maybe grow,
exactly.
you're trying to give an opportunity to the scene in general to have the opportunity to level up. So I agree, I'll give it an A.
Yeah,
I
yeah,
think Cole, and I think since the re-Jason Lakeification, ownerfication of the team as well, it's been fun to see the brand steps. I know he keeps teasing
yeah.
a potential logo redesign or
Oh,
reversion or
Mike,
whatever.
you didn't see it, did you?
I didn't see it. What happened? What
It's
did I
already
miss?
leaked, Mike.
It's
It's
already
already
leaked.
leaked.
Did he leak
No,
it?
I'm not saying anything else. That's it. You have to go find it yourself now.
All right, I gotta go looking apparently. All right, so let's look back on this. This is tough semester for your student, for your child.
Yeah.
Complexity.
It's been a
Um,
tough season, yeah, for sure. Like it's not been smooth sailing, but I think there's definitely some positives come out of it. But yeah, I mean, the irony is that our stability in our report card is pretty terrible.
yeah, it's kind of all over
Yeah,
the place, much like
yeah,
much like some of your results.
yeah.
Um,
Watching this is like how we play it during a week.
yeah.
Like D plus to start off, we lose the first game. C, we scrape through the next game. B minus, we do okay. B plus, and then we get better towards the end of the week. So yeah, it's sort of like
Feels
it's sort of like our way through a tournament.
nice little bit of
Except,
symmetry there.
except usually there's like a D at the end for the. I mean, the thing is
Well,
that actually not always true actually, because sometimes we play really really fucking good, and then mouse sports are just better.
that does happen. I am well familiar
Yeah,
with the heartbreak of watching the
have you?
final round. I'll always remember. You remember? Was it Cato 23? I think where you guys played the heartbreaker against VP to
Yeah.
nearly make
Oh,
the
yeah,
arena.
yeah, yeah. I remember it
It was
well.
either
Yeah,
22 or 23.
that was 2023. Yeah.
I was in the green room. I was on desk for that game. Or no, I was on desk for the other game, but I kept running
Oh
over to
right.
watch your game. I don't remember
Yeah.
what exactly it
The
was.
green room was going
We
crazy.
were
That
because
like
it was
it
one
was
green
it
room
was
was all the guys who weren't working who had stayed to watch who
yeah,
were off, and it was like Connor, Maui, Mohan, like that group, and then
yeah,
I'm in there with Kassad, who's just laughing his ass off at me, stressed out, and Blah, who's also laughing his
yeah.
ass off
I
at me,
remember it.
stressed
Yeah.
out, like jumping up and down, and yeah, it wound up being like I think it was a 16-14 or something to
Yeah, it was
drop
it
it.
was real close. I remember
I'm
the funniest thing that happened in that game was when James just for some reason just jumps as he goes around short, and then Håkon kills him from the pit and the bomb flies on the top of the canopy.
yeah,
They
yeah, yeah,
had like
yeah.
10 seconds and they couldn't find the bomb.
Yep.
Although
So
I've referenced this before, but that was one of the matches where Håkon shouts, "You fucking noobs!" at the other team, and then every time he shouts something at the opponents, we lose. He did it versus VP in that game, which was a heartbreaker to lose, and he did it versus Imperial in the in
uh,
the other heartbreaking loss we had, the RMR qualifier. So Håkon's not allowed to shout at the opponent anymore. It's a bad
that's good.
omen.
That's good. Bad omen there. So final grade, season as a
Yeah.
whole. Talking about what you did, what would you give complexity as a final grade as a team
It's tough because
back
like
half of 2024?
as an organization, we drag it up a lot because of like the
Yeah.
brand and the NA and like the fact that we're like staying to our NA-ness, which is also kind of branding. You know, I feel like the results and the expectations have to drag us down a bit though. Like I don't think I could like with a good conscience give us anything better than like a C. Like I feel like the team, like us as a Counter Strike team, we've dragged it down a bit. Like I think
Hmm.
we have to. I think we had to feel like we've done better. I think the results, you know, the final placings of where we finished in pretty much every single tournament we played was, you know, I feel like there's very easy places where we could have done better and we should have done better.
Yeah.
So I feel like a C something, Mike, and I don't know if it's going to be positive or negative.
I
I
think if
think
that's
it,
true, then you just give it a C.
yeah, it might have to be a C. It's kind of like barely passing because like we, you know, again, you know, relative to our expectations and the external factors and things like that, we've done pretty good. We've done probably a roundabout where we should be, but you know, relative to our internal expectations and you know how we feel like we should have done, I feel like it's still pretty negative. So I think C is about right.
Okay.
Like it's hard to be yeah, it's hard to get right. I think you know if you want to drag it up with the branding and you know staying North American and things like that, then you could. But I don't think that would be fair to say. I think we have to stay at least a
Yeah,
C.
I think you're right that at the end of the
Yeah,
day, results and expectations does have to take a lot of weight for a Counter Strike team.
yeah.
There is a saying in
I
North
think yeah,
America, which is I don't know if you guys have this. C's get degrees. But
yeah,
yeah, I think maybe Complexity hoping to raise the GPA a little bit next season, huh?
yeah. 100%, 100%. I think as a Counter Strike team, I think we've underperformed. I think as an organization, I think we're doing really well. I think we're doing everything possible to try and, you know, elevate ourselves, elevate the ecosystem. I think we're on top of all that stuff. So, yeah, I think big shout out to all the guys back at the HQ for all the work they do for us and all the work they do for NACS and everything else. And yeah, hopefully we can stop being bitter disappointments. You know.
Well, on that very optimistic note
those
to wrap.
those were not anyone else's words. That was just me being, you know, I was just making it seem
Yeah.
worse than it is. But yeah, no one to me at least has used the word bitter disappointment. We've certainly had some bitterly disappointing results, but nothing that anyone's ever said to us.
No.
Yeah, no, the HQ is really supportive. Obviously, they you know they're disappointed when we lose, and you know they'd love it if we could win a bit more, and you know who wouldn't love it if we could win a bit more, right? Yeah,
Yeah.
apart from our opponents, of course. But you know it's you know they're right behind us, and they have a lot of faith in us, and they you know they can also see what we see when you know how close you can get and you know the fine margins that can tip a game you know both in your favor and against you and
Yeah.
you know some games we watch and we're just like holy shit like nothing's going for us this game and then some games are like holy crap like everything just went perfect and you know we should have lost this round and this round and this round but you know this thing went perfectly to plan and or not even to plan but this thing just went perfectly and we won you know so it's what's the quote from oh, I can't remember the movie name off the top of my head, but it's life is a game of inches. You know,
Yeah.
it's Al Pacino,
Game of
right?
Inches. That's
Yeah,
Al Pacino. Yep.
it's like that. It's like that.
Is that the
But like,
Replacements? No.
no, oh, it's got Jamie Foxx in it, right? He plays the cocky quarterback. Oh,
It's the Game of Inches. Any given Sunday.
any given Sunday. Yeah, that's the movie.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
it's like that quote. You know, like it wouldn't be inches in this game. It'd be like you know, milliseconds or
Yeah.
something. But yeah, it's exactly that quote. You know, like it's just there's so many tiny micro decisions and you know split second decisions and you know if your aim is just a little bit crisper that one time, you know, you enter the site and everything goes perfectly. There's it's just yeah, it's a that's what makes it so exciting to watch, right? You know, that's why
Yeah.
you're always on the edge of your seat. except during 2018 when Astralis just ground everyone to death. That was
Well,
even I got a little bit. I I got bored of watching Counter-Strike, and I was working for the team.
Yeah, in this era, it's anyone's game, as we've seen. You can be, Navi and not make the playoffs. You could be Spirit and have many stumpers bookended by two great moments, right? Like it's all over the place.
Mike, I'm going to apologize, mate. I accidentally just clicked the off
You're
button.
fine. That's this is where we should wrap up. I've been holding you for like 2 hours at this point, so thank you so much for joining me for this pretty ridiculous thought exercise that I've cooked up. Really appreciate you being willing to come on and talk about it, especially after obviously a less than strictly fun season.
Always, Mike. Always. Do you know what? I wish they did more press conferences and stuff like this. I wish they put us in front of the microphone like after every game, because I feel like it would just help like remove so many of like the rumors and the questions and everything else. Like I feel like everything is sort of done in secrecy, and people feel like they can't talk to a team that's lost. It's like, go look at every single professional sport. Like, just ask questions. Like, I'm never going to decline it. If someone asks me for an interview after every single game, I will do that interview every single time. Like 100% guaranteed. And
well, I know what I'm doing. I feel like that should be sidelining.
I feel like that should be the outlook on every single player, because like there's no reason why you can't have a conversation with someone. And even if it's just like, yeah, man, we played like shit and I feel bad and I want to go fucking cry in my bedroom, because sometimes that's what I want to do.
Yeah.
But like I wouldn't say that exactly, but I feel like there's no reason to like reject media or like feel like you can't talk to someone just because you had a bad game, or like your team had a bad game, or your team's underperforming, or whatever it is, because the media is also part of the game, right? It's the off the server part of the game, and navigating that is part of it too. So yeah, I'm gonna really shoot myself in the foot here, but yeah, anyone who wants to interview me after any match complexity plays that I am present at next year, as long as I'm not being like whisked away into a shuttle immediately, which doesn't usually happen, I will do the interview, because I will always have something to say, and I will do my best to give you everything that you want, because that's part of the job, and that's what I get paid for, and that's what I feel like is a pretty big duty of mine towards any journalist or anything. So
there you go. Every journalist, every CS journalist, clip that. His face isn't in anymore, so he might be able to deny it because he turned his cam off.
I'm trying to fix it, but it's not
show him this clip. It's fine. We should wrap. Thank you so much for doing this.
Of course.
Yeah, really excited for this one. Really excited to see what the next steps are for complexity in 2025. Thank you, Graham.
Thank you very much.